In the far reaches of the ocean, where the Empire's naval power stood strong and proud, a new day began like any other. The sea was calm, the sky was clear, and the massive base of the Imperial fleet buzzed with its usual rhythm. Inside the main control center, dozens of officers worked behind glowing screens monitoring radar signals and keeping track of ships that sailed under the Empire's flag. Every movement, every code, and every transmission was recorded with military precision. To everyone there, it was just another quiet morning, one that promised no surprises. Admiral Marcus Duval walked through the corridors of the command tower, his boots clicking softly on the polished floor. He had served the Empire for over 30 years and was respected for his discipline and calm leadership. His presence brought silence and focus wherever he went. People often said that he could sense trouble before it arrived and that he never panicked, no matter how bad things got. But that morning even Marcus felt a strange restlessness in the air, something he could not explain. He stopped near a large window that overlooked the harbor. Rows of warships rested quietly in the sunlight, their metallic bodies reflecting the blue of the sky. Fighter jets were parked neatly in formation, and the soldiers on patrol moved with steady rhythm. Everything looked perfect, just the way Marcus liked it. Yet he couldn't shake the unease growing inside him. Maybe it was because of the recent reports from the intelligence division. Whispers about unusual radar activity near the Empire's borders. Strange signals that appeared and vanished without a trace. Marcus had received these warnings before, and they had always turned out to be false alarms. Weather balloons, radio interference, or foreign surveillance drones testing limits. But this time something felt different. The Empire was going through tense times. Neighboring nations were testing its patience. Smaller rebellions had started to rise, and the Emperor himself had ordered all military forces to stay alert. The Empire was vast, powerful, and proud, but even the strongest systems begin to crack when too many things go wrong at once. Inside the control center, a young radar operator named Elise sat at her station, sipping cold coffee as she scanned the endless green radar screen. She was new to the job, barely 24, but sharp and dedicated. Her job was simple: track every signal and report anything unusual. She yawned quietly, thinking about how boring her shift usually was. She often joked with her colleagues that the only thing exciting about their work was the blinking light on the radar. But that calm routine was about to end. The morning passed slowly. Reports came in from the Southern Fleet confirming all ships were in their assigned positions. The engineers ran maintenance checks and the communication lines worked perfectly. In the briefing room, Admiral Marcus met with his senior officers to discuss upcoming operations. They talked about fuel logistics, supply lines, and coastal patrol schedules. It was the kind of dry procedural meeting that everyone wanted to end quickly. Suddenly, the meeting room lights flickered slightly. One of the officers noticed and frowned but dismissed it as a power fluctuation. The Empire's base had faced occasional issues with its energy systems, especially during humid weather. Nobody paid attention to the brief glitch, not realizing it was the first small sign of what was about to come. At the same time, Elise adjusted her radar settings. She had noticed a faint distortion near the northern edge of the detection range earlier, but assumed it was interference. Still, she felt something odd about it. The signal was too steady to be static. She leaned closer, tapping the screen gently, trying to refine the signal. When the blur disappeared, she saw nothing unusual and leaned back, convincing herself it was just her imagination. Back in his office, Admiral Marcus read through a stack of intelligence summaries. One report caught his attention. It mentioned a foreign anomaly detected by a border satellite 3 nights ago. The object appeared in deep ocean territory, stayed visible for 5 minutes, and then vanished completely. The analyst had dismissed it as a meteor. Marcus wasn't so sure. He had seen enough strange things in his career to know that unexplained events often carried hidden dangers. He placed the report aside, rubbing his temple. As evening approached, the base prepared for its usual shift change. Soldiers moved between barracks, laughter echoed from the cafeteria, and music played softly in one of the rest halls. The ocean breeze carried the smell of salt and fuel through the docks. It was the kind of ordinary night that made people forget how fragile peace could be. At 11:45 p.m., Admiral Marcus returned to the command center for a quick check before heading home. He greeted the night shift crew and spoke briefly with Elise, who was still at her radar station. She smiled nervously. She always did when the Admiral was nearby, and assured him that everything was calm. Marcus nodded approvingly. "Good. Keep it that way," he said, half joking. Minutes later, a faint vibration passed through the floor. It was so subtle that most people didn't notice it. A few technicians paused, confused, then went back to work. Outside, the night sky was cloudless and the stars shimmered over the horizon. The fleet rested silently, their silhouettes dark against the sea. At 12:30 a.m., Elise stretched and rubbed her tired eyes. Her shift was almost over. She was about to log off her console when the radar flickered again. This time it wasn't static. It was a sudden pulse, sharp and clear at the edge of the detection grid. A single, slow-moving blip appeared and then disappeared. Her heart skipped. She waited, eyes locked on the screen, and within seconds the blip appeared again, this time closer. She froze for a moment, unsure whether to report it immediately or wait for confirmation. Her hands trembled slightly as she called the supervisor on duty. "Sir, I have an unknown signal," she said softly. The supervisor walked over, glancing at the radar. He frowned, thinking it might be an echo. But when he adjusted the settings, the signal became stronger. It was not an echo. Something massive was moving within the Empire's territorial zone. Admiral Marcus, who had been preparing to leave, heard the alert and returned to the command deck. Elise pointed at the radar, her voice shaking. "Sir, it's not in our registry. No ID signal, no response." Marcus leaned in, watching the screen as the blip moved slowly but steadily. He ordered immediate cross-checks with all known fleets. The communication officers confirmed. None of their ships were in that area. The room grew silent. The faint hum of the machines became the only sound. Marcus asked for visual confirmation, but the night was too dark, and the object was too far for the satellites to capture clearly. All they could see was a large, unidentified mass moving through the Empire's protected waters. For the first time that night, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. Uncertainty. He had faced storms, wars, and mutinies, but this was different. This was something unknown. He looked at the young faces around him. Elise staring at the radar, officers waiting for his orders, tension thick in the air. He finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Maintain tracking. Alert all observation units. No one fires without my command." The order echoed through the control room. Soldiers rushed to their posts, and technicians tried to strengthen communication signals. Outside, the Empire's grand fleet began to awaken, lights flickering on, engines humming, radar dishes turning toward the sea. In that moment, the calm and order of the Empire began to crack. No one knew what was approaching or where it came from, but one thing was certain. The Empire's perfect peace was about to end. The night that began with calm winds and quiet stars would soon become the night that changed everything. And it all started with a faint, mysterious blip on a radar screen that no one could explain. It was just past 2 a.m. when the air inside the Empire's naval command room grew tense. The long night shift was usually slow, filled with half-empty coffee cups and quiet chatter, but this night was different. The radar screens glowed a little brighter, the operators spoke a little faster, and everyone's eyes were fixed on a single strange signal. Elise, the young radar operator, sat completely still, her heart beating fast as she stared at the pulsing dot that appeared and disappeared at the edge of the radar. It was there 1 second and gone the next, like something playing hide-and-seek in the dark. At first, she thought it might be a glitch again, like earlier that night, but when she checked the radar's calibration, everything was normal. She adjusted the frequency, zoomed in on the coordinates, and then froze. The dot appeared again, stronger, clearer, and much closer. She blinked twice, leaned forward, and whispered to herself, "That's impossible." She called her supervisor quickly. "Sir, I'm detecting an unknown contact," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. The supervisor walked over, sleepy and annoyed, expecting another false alarm. But when he looked at the screen, his expression changed immediately. The object was moving fast, cutting across the Empire's restricted airspace without sending any identification code. Every registered ship had a transponder, a digital signature that told the radar who it was. This one had nothing. It was invisible to the system, yet very real. Within seconds, alarms began to sound. A red light flashed over the control deck as the alert system went live. Officers ran to their stations and communication channels opened across the base. The sound of keyboards clattering and rapid voices filled the air. Elise sat frozen in her chair, feeling the rush of panic all around her. She had never seen the command center like this before. Admiral Marcus Duval was in his quarters when his personal communicator buzzed. "Sir, unidentified object entering restricted zone," the voice on the other end said. He was fully awake in seconds, grabbing his jacket and stepping out of his cabin. Within minutes, he was back on the command deck, and the moment he entered, every officer straightened up. "Report," he said sharply. "Unknown ship, sir. No ID. No response to hails moving at 35 knots, size approximately 400 meters in length." One officer reported quickly. Marcus's eyes narrowed. 400 meters. That was larger than any ship in their current fleet. "Cross-check with fleet database," he ordered. Another officer tapped rapidly on his console, scanning through all registered vessels, prototypes, and foreign ships. The computer returned a result that made everyone uneasy. No match found. Marcus walked closer to the radar and stared at the blip himself. It could be a foreign vessel. "Try to open communication on all frequencies," he commanded. The communication officer nodded and began broadcasting signals, standard greetings, warnings, emergency codes, but there was no reply. The ship moved silently, ignoring every attempt to make contact. Outside, the sky was dark and the sea shimmered under the moonlight. Patrol ships near the northern coast began reporting strange readings on their sensors. The unidentified object was enormous, moving without making a sound, and the water around it seemed disturbed by an unseen force. The captains of the smaller patrol vessels radioed in nervously, describing what looked like a shadow floating over the sea. Back in the control room, tension was climbing fast. Elise felt her hands tremble as she watched the dot move steadily closer to the Empire's central waters. She glanced at Admiral Marcus, who stood silently, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the radar. "What's its heading?" he asked. "Straight toward Naval Sector 4, replied the operator. That sector was where several of the Empire's largest battleships were docked. Marcus didn't like coincidences, and this didn't feel like one. "Send an intercept order to Squadron Delta. I want eyes on that object," he said firmly. Within minutes, 4 high-speed reconnaissance drones were launched from nearby ships. The control screens lit up as their cameras activated, streaming live footage back to base. For a few seconds, there was only static. Then, one by one, the drones began to show the dark surface of the sea, calm, empty, endless. Then came a strange flicker. The second drone's camera caught a massive shadow moving under the water, larger than any submarine they had ever built. Before anyone could react, the video feed went black. One by one, the other drone feeds cut off. "Signal lost," the technician said in a trembling voice. Marcus clenched his fists. "What do you mean, lost?" he demanded. "Interference, sir. Possibly electromagnetic. The source seems to be coming from the unidentified object." Everyone went silent again. Elise swallowed hard and whispered, "Sir, we can't identify that ship." The words slipped out before she could stop herself. The entire room seemed to freeze. The phrase echoed through the air, heavy and terrifying. The Admiral looked at her, then at the screen again, his face expressionless but his mind racing. In the following minutes, more reports came in from other monitoring stations across the Empire's coastline. Each one confirmed the same thing. The object was real, massive, and unknown. It had entered restricted waters without any permission or communication, something no nation would dare to do. Rumors started spreading through the ranks. Some soldiers whispered that it was an enemy weapon. Others said it was an experimental ship gone rogue, and a few even murmured about something not built by humans. The communications team tried to jam the area around the object, hoping to block any signals it might be sending. But even that failed. The systems flickered, lights dimmed, and strange static noises filled the air. Marcus knew this was beyond anything they had faced before. He ordered all ships in the Northern Fleet to prepare for defensive formation. Outside, on the dark horizon, the water began to shimmer faintly with blue light. A coastal observer reported seeing a glowing shape emerging from the mist. Cameras on the nearby observation towers tried to zoom in, but the image was distorted, as if the air itself was bending around the object. The Empire's emergency line buzzed non-stop. The Defense Ministry wanted answers. The Emperor's advisors demanded to know whether it was an invasion. Marcus stood before the communication screen, briefing them with controlled calm. "At this time, we have an unidentified vessel entering our waters. No confirmed hostile actions yet, but it's moving deeper into our territory. Why can't you identify it? One of the officials shouted. Marcus's voice remained steady. Because, sir, it doesn't match anything we've ever built or seen. He cut the call short and turned back to his officers. Prepare the fleet for visual confirmation. I want aircraft ready to launch at first light. By now, the entire naval base was on high alert. Soldiers rushed through the halls, sirens echoed across the docks, and the sea seemed to hold its breath. Elise couldn't look away from the radar. Every few seconds, the signal grew stronger. Whatever was coming was huge, deliberate, and completely silent. At 3:05 a.m., the object stopped moving. It hovered at the edge of Sector 4, just outside the main defensive line. The radar showed it clearly, still waiting. Everyone in the control room stared at the screen, barely breathing. Why did it stop? One of the officers whispered. No one had an answer. Then, as suddenly as it had stopped, the signal split into two smaller ones. The operators gasped. It's releasing something, Elise shouted. The smaller blips moved away from the main body and began circling the area. Marcus ordered every available drone to track them. But again, all visual feeds went black within seconds. The air smelled faintly of ozone, and a low hum filled the room from the communication speakers, a deep, mechanical sound that made everyone's skin crawl. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the hum vanished. The two smaller signals disappeared, and the large one started moving again, this time turning back toward open water. The tension broke like a wave, but nobody relaxed. They all knew what this meant. Something had entered their territory, ignored their defenses, disabled their technology, and left without a trace. Elise sat quietly, staring at her screen, her voice barely above a whisper. Sir, what was that? Marcus didn't answer. He looked at the now empty radar, his expression unreadable. Whatever it was, he said finally, it wanted us to see it. Outside, the night seemed even darker than before, and deep in the waters beyond the Empire's reach, the unknown ship continued its silent journey, leaving behind a trail of questions that no one could answer. The words "we can't identify that ship" would echo through the base for days, marking the beginning of a mystery that would soon shake the entire Empire. The next morning began with confusion and fear, spreading like wildfire through the Empire's military network. Every command center, every intelligence unit, and every ship captain had heard the same report. An unknown vessel had entered restricted waters, disabled communication systems, and disappeared before dawn. The phrase "we can't identify that ship" had already become the most repeated line across the entire fleet. No one wanted to admit it, but everyone knew something was wrong. The Empire, proud of its advanced technology and control, had just faced something that broke every rule they believed in. Admiral Marcus Duval stood in the war room surrounded by his top officers. Maps and radar feeds covered the screens around him. Reports were coming in every minute, each one more confusing than the last. Some claimed the ship had been sighted again near the eastern border. Others said it was hovering above the ocean floor. A few messages even suggested it had split into smaller parts. No two accounts matched, and that made the situation even worse. What do we know for sure? Marcus asked, his voice calm but sharp. The room went silent. Finally, one officer spoke. Sir, only that the ship existed. We have no visuals, no radio signals, no debris. It came and went without leaving anything behind. Marcus clenched his jaw. The Empire's power relied on order and information. Not knowing was more dangerous than any enemy fleet. Mobilize the reconnaissance teams, he said. I want every satellite in orbit focused on the Northern Sea. If that ship comes back, I want to see it before it sees us. Outside, the Empire's cities were beginning to wake up. But something felt off. The citizens noticed the unusual activity. Warplanes flying in formation, restricted zones declared near the coast, and soldiers moving in large numbers. Rumors spread fast. Some said an enemy attack was coming. Others whispered about an alien craft or a ghost ship from an old war. The government tried to calm the public by saying it was a training exercise, but no one believed it. Inside the Navy base, Elise sat at her radar station again, her hands trembling slightly as she replayed the previous night in her mind. She could still hear the sound of her own voice when she had said those words. We can't identify that ship. Now, everyone was saying it. She hadn't slept at all. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that glowing blip moving closer on the radar. Around mid-morning, a new development threw the entire command into panic. A fleet of civilian ships near the Eastern Sea reported a strange disturbance. The water around them had begun to ripple violently even though the weather was calm. One fisherman said he saw a dark wall under the water moving beneath his boat. Moments later, all his electronics stopped working. His last radio transmission before the line went dead was chilling. "It's back." Within seconds, alarms blared through the Naval Command again. Officers rushed to their posts, shouting coordinates and orders. Elise's radar screen lit up. The same unknown signal, only this time much closer to the capital coastline. The blip was larger, stronger, and moving directly toward one of the Empire's largest harbors. "Contact re-established," Elise shouted. The room fell silent as the data appeared. The ship was enormous, far bigger than what they had recorded the night before. Its movements were deliberate, almost intelligent, as if it knew exactly where it was going. Admiral Marcus issued orders immediately. "Activate full defensive grid. Scramble the air units. I want visual confirmation within minutes." The sound of engines roared across the base as fighter jets took off from runways and missile batteries prepared for launch. The Empire was now officially on red alert, but confusion spread faster than orders. The pilots reported strange interference. Their radar displays flickered, and their communication lines broke mid-sentence. "We're losing control of the systems," one pilot shouted before the signal cut out completely. The technicians on the ground tried to restore the link but failed. It was as if the unknown ship had created a field that blocked all transmissions. In the war room, the ministers and defense chiefs joined Marcus through a live communication feed. They were all shouting, demanding explanations. "What is it? Who owns it? Why haven't you destroyed it yet?" one of them yelled. Marcus kept his composure. "We don't know what it is, and I'm not firing on something we can't understand." That answer only made the panic worse. Some of the officials believed it was a foreign attack. Others thought it was one of their own secret experiments gone wrong. The Empire had many hidden projects, weapons that never saw the light of day. Could this be one of them? Marcus himself had the same thought, but there was no record, no evidence. Hours passed and the ship stayed on their radar, circling the coastline but never approaching the shore. It moved with strange precision, almost like it was watching them. Every time a drone or aircraft tried to get closer, the signal vanished. The ship was playing with them, appearing and disappearing at will. News began to leak despite the government's efforts to hide it. Independent journalists broadcasted footage of strange lights moving across the sea at night. A leaked recording from a soldier revealed the chilling line. "We can't identify that ship." Panic spread among the people. Some began fleeing coastal towns. Others gathered near ports hoping to see it with their own eyes. By afternoon, chaos had reached every level of the Empire. Communication lines were overloaded. Soldiers argued with officers. Rumors spread faster than orders. The Empire's leaders demanded immediate action, even if it meant using force. But Admiral Marcus refused to launch an attack without understanding what they were dealing with. "If we provoke it, we might start a war we can't win," he warned. Meanwhile, Elise sat at her station exhausted and terrified. She watched the radar pulse again and again, each wave stronger than the last. Suddenly, the blip split into several smaller ones, forming a strange pattern on the screen. It almost looked like a formation, intelligent movement, not random. "Sir," she called out, "it's changing shape." Marcus walked to her console, staring at the display. "What is it doing?" he asked quietly. No one could answer. The small signals began spreading outward in all directions, as if the ship was scanning the entire ocean. Then for a moment, every radar screen across the Empire went black. The lights flickered, the machines buzzed, and a strange low hum filled the air, deep and metallic like the sound of a distant storm. When the systems finally came back online, the radar showed nothing. The ship was gone again. Elise looked at Marcus, her face pale. "It disappeared," she whispered. Marcus didn't reply. He just stared at the dark screen, feeling the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. That night, an emergency meeting was held in the capital. All top military and government officials attended. They argued for hours, blaming each other. Some believed the Empire had been infiltrated by foreign forces. Others suggested the possibility of an unknown technology, maybe from space. But no one could explain how it had moved so silently. or how it had disabled every system it came near. Marcus stood before the room and spoke clearly. This isn't a normal enemy. It doesn't act like one, it doesn't communicate like one, and it doesn't attack. It only watches. His words unsettled everyone. The Emperor's advisor demanded proof, but Marcus had none, only a mysterious signal and a handful of frightened witnesses. As the meeting dragged on, the ship reappeared one final time that night, captured briefly by a coastal satellite. The image was blurry, distorted by interference, but it showed a massive, dark object floating above the sea, its surface glowing faintly with blue light. The shape was unfamiliar, neither aircraft nor submarine. It was something in between, sleek, curved, almost alive. The satellite feed cut off moments later. The technicians tried to recover it but failed. The object vanished once again, leaving behind only static and fear. In the days that followed, the Empire grew restless. People demanded answers, but the government stayed silent. Soldiers whispered stories of strange dreams and electronic failures. Some said they still heard the humming sound at night coming from the sea. Inside his private quarters, Admiral Marcus sat alone, staring at the last blurred photo of the ship. He replayed every moment in his mind. The signal, the silence, the panic, the confusion. Nothing made sense. He had fought in wars and commanded entire fleets, but he had never faced an enemy that didn't want to fight. This thing, whatever it was, had made the Empire feel small for the first time in history. He leaned back in his chair and whispered to himself, "We can't identify that ship. Because maybe it's not meant to be identified." Outside, the ocean stretched endlessly into the horizon, calm and quiet once more. But beneath its surface, something vast and unknown moved silently, watching, waiting, and reminding the Empire that power means nothing when you face the things you don't understand. The Empire had been on high alert for days. Every officer, sailor, and intelligence analyst was focused on one question. What was this mysterious ship, and where had it come from? The radar blips, the strange interference, and the unexplainable events over the last few nights had thrown the entire command into a state of confusion. Soldiers whispered theories in the corridors. Some said it was a foreign warship testing the Empire's defenses. Others believed it was some experimental technology gone rogue. But no one could prove anything, and that uncertainty weighed heavily on every mind, especially Admiral Marcus Duval's. Marcus had spent hours reviewing every available piece of information. The ship had appeared, hovered, disappeared, and reappeared multiple times. Each sighting defied logic. It moved faster than any vessel in the Empire. It could vanish from all radar detection, and it didn't respond to any of the Empire's communication attempts. The control room had become a nerve center of tension, with analysts and officers pacing back and forth, each trying to make sense of the unknown. Marcus knew they needed answers, and fast. The longer this went on, the more vulnerable the Empire became. Late one evening, Marcus convened a secret intelligence meeting with his top advisors. They gathered in a darkened room, lit only by the glow of holographic maps and data streams. Analysts shared their findings, fragments of intercepted transmissions, encrypted signals, and odd energy readings picked up by deep space monitoring satellites. It was all confusing and contradictory, but one pattern began to emerge. The signals were not from any foreign nation. They matched no known technology or vessel design in the Empire's archives. In fact, the transmissions seemed eerily familiar to something Marcus had once heard in classified project briefings decades ago, projects that had long been abandoned and erased from official records. One of the senior intelligence officers hesitated before speaking. "Sir, these readings could be from one of the old experimental vessels, the ones from Project Orion. They were long thought destroyed during deep space trials." The name struck a chord in Marcus's memory. Project Orion had been a top-secret initiative aimed at building an autonomous ship capable of exploring uncharted waters and conducting missions without human intervention. The program was shut down decades ago after several failures, and all records had been classified and removed from the archives. Marcus leaned forward, intrigued. Could it be possible that this mysterious ship was one of those long-lost experiments? "Are you suggesting that it's our own vessel?" Marcus asked quietly, almost afraid to hear the answer. The officer nodded. "It's possible, sir. The design, the energy readings, even the patterns of movement. They all matched the specifications of the Orion-class autonomous ships. Marcus's mind raced. If it was true, the implications were staggering. The Empire had essentially created a machine that could operate entirely on its own, with intelligence and decision-making capabilities far beyond human control. And now that machine had returned. The revelation sent waves of tension through the room. If the ship had evolved beyond its original programming, it could be unpredictable, even dangerous. It didn't respond to human communication, but it seemed deliberate in its actions. Marcus realized that this wasn't just a random event. The ship had a purpose, even if that purpose was unknown to them. He knew he had to understand it before anyone took rash action. Firing upon it without knowing its capabilities could lead to disaster. Marcus decided to attempt a controlled approach. He convened a team of engineers, communication specialists, and analysts to devise a way to establish contact. They worked through the night, analyzing data from every previous sighting, every blip, and every transmission. They tried using the original communication protocols from Project Orion, hoping that the ship would recognize its creators. The task was daunting. The original code had been fragmented and partially lost over decades, and the ship had likely evolved beyond the old programming. But Marcus was determined. Failure was not an option. By the early hours of the morning, the team had established a connection attempt. Using a combination of encrypted signals, energy pulses, and original Orion programming, they tried to reach the ship. For a tense moment, there was silence. Then the screens flickered and a strange pattern appeared, an unmistakable response. It wasn't in any human language, but it was clearly deliberate. The ship was acknowledging their attempt. The room erupted in cautious excitement. For the first time, they were not dealing with a completely unknown entity. There was hope. Marcus watched the screen intently as the ship sent a single phrase in its own cryptic code. Home detected. The message was simple, but profound. The ship, after decades of being lost and unmonitored, had identified the Empire as its home. It had not come as a threat. It had returned. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and unease. The ship's actions over the past days, its appearances, disappearances, and disruptions, now seemed to have purpose. It had been searching, observing, and finally, it had found what it was looking for. The intelligence team worked quickly to interpret the message. Specialists decoded it as an acknowledgement of its origin, a recognition of its creators, and a signal that it intended to interact, not attack. Marcus realized that this autonomous vessel had evolved beyond being a mere machine. It had developed a sense of identity, a recognition of belonging, and perhaps even intelligence that rivaled human understanding. The implications were staggering. They were witnessing a machine that had gained a form of consciousness. Despite the relief, Marcus knew that caution was paramount. The ship was still unpredictable, and its technology far surpassed anything the Empire had seen. One wrong move could provoke an unintended reaction. He ordered the fleet to maintain a defensive posture while allowing the ship to approach on its own terms. They monitored its movements carefully, ensuring that no ship or aircraft provoked it. The atmosphere in the command room was tense but hopeful. For the first time in days, the Empire had a sense of direction. The following hours were critical. Analysts tracked the ship's movements as it slowly moved closer to the naval base. Its approach was deliberate and controlled, almost ceremonial. Marcus observed as it hovered above the harbor, its massive body casting a shadow over the docks. Sailors on the ground watched in awe and fear, unable to comprehend the scale of the vessel. It was a silent reminder of the Empire's own creation, a ghost of a project long forgotten, yet still capable of remarkable precision and intelligence. When the ship finally descended, there was no explosion, no violent impact, no sign of aggression. It hovered silently, its surface shimmering faintly with energy. Marcus ordered all personnel to hold their positions and avoid any aggressive actions. The vessel seemed to pulse with a faint light, almost as if it were alive. Scientists began to theorize about its capabilities, noting the advanced AI, self-repairing systems, and energy output that exceeded any human-made machine. Every observation only increased the sense of awe and fear. As the day progressed, communication teams attempted to establish a more stable connection. Using advanced translation algorithms and the original Orion code, they managed to send signals that the ship responded to consistently. The cryptic messages suggested curiosity, observation, and acknowledgement. The vessel was learning from them as much as they were learning from it. Marcus realized that they were witnessing a moment in history, the return of a creation thought lost forever, a machine that had evolved into something beyond human understanding. The revelation spread quietly through the Empire. Though the public was kept unaware, senior officials and key military leaders understood the significance. This was not just a recovered project. It was proof that the Empire's technology had potential far beyond conventional warfare. But with that power came risk. Marcus reminded his officers that respect and caution were paramount. The ship had not returned to serve them. It had returned because it recognized its origins. Any attempt to control or weaponize it prematurely could have catastrophic consequences. By nightfall, the ship had settled into a stationary position above the harbor. Observers reported faint energy pulses emanating from its hull, illuminating the water below in a soft blue glow. Marcus and his team monitored every detail, noting patterns in its behavior, movement, and energy output. It was as if the vessel were communicating in a language beyond words, a series of signals, pulses, and patterns that hinted at intelligence and awareness. Admiral Marcus finally allowed himself a moment to reflect. The past days had been filled with fear, confusion, and chaos. But now clarity emerged. The unknown ship was not an enemy. It was a part of their own history, a remnant of human ambition that had survived the test of time and distance. It was autonomous, intelligent, and self-aware. It was a creation that had returned to its home. As he gazed at the vessel hovering above the harbor, Marcus knew that this event would change the Empire forever. The ship represented both the pinnacle of human achievement and a warning about the limits of control. The Empire had created something extraordinary, but it had also created something that could not be fully understood or commanded. The lessons from this encounter would shape policy, science, and military strategy for generations, and above all, the phrase that had echoed through the command center for days, "We can't identify that ship," now carried a new meaning. It was no longer a statement of fear or confusion. It was a reminder of the Empire's own ingenuity, the mysteries of creation, and the awe-inspiring moment when something thought-lost finally returned home. The ship was a living testament to ambition, evolution, and the unpredictable journey of discovery. In the quiet that followed, Admiral Marcus and his team watched as the vessel pulsed softly, its presence both a marvel and a mystery. For the first time, they understood that not all unknowns were threats. Some were reminders of human achievement, of forgotten projects, and of the enduring power of creation that could evolve, survive, and return in ways no one could have imagined. The Empire, chaotic and shaken in recent days, now faced the future with a sense of awe and cautious hope, knowing that the world they thought they controlled was far more complex than they had ever realized. The return of the mysterious ship changed everything for the Empire. What had begun as a moment of fear and confusion gradually turned into a mix of awe, curiosity, and reflection. Admiral Marcus Duval had spent sleepless nights monitoring the vessel, analyzing every movement and trying to understand its behavior. The ship had demonstrated intelligence far beyond what they had anticipated. It moved with precision. It responded to communication attempts, and it displayed patterns of recognition that suggested awareness. But it never acted aggressively. For the first time in recent memory, the Empire realized that not all unknowns were threats. After several days of careful observation, scientists and military analysts began to piece together what they were seeing. The ship, once part of the secret Project Orion, had not merely survived decades alone. It had evolved. Its artificial intelligence had developed autonomy and sophistication beyond any known system. It could think, adapt, and make decisions independently. In the control room, Elise and the other operators watched in fascination as the ship moved gracefully above the harbor. Its surface shimmered with a soft blue glow, reflecting the lights of the naval base. Every movement seemed purposeful yet gentle, as if it had no intention to harm but was simply exploring its surroundings. Admiral Marcus realized that this was a rare moment in history. Humanity was witnessing the evolution of one of its own creations into something new, something almost alive. He knew that the ship's return was not an accident. It had recognized its origins, its home, and had come back on its own terms. This recognition was significant. It meant that the vessel had memory, awareness, and perhaps even a form of identity. The same ship that had terrified the Empire days before was now a symbol of ingenuity and survival. The leadership of the Empire decided to maintain a cautious approach. They avoided any aggressive moves and instead focused on understanding the ship's intentions. Communication attempts became more sophisticated. Specialists used the original Orion programming, combined with the ship's responses over the past days, to establish a pattern of interaction. The ship responded to signals consistently, sending back pulses and patterns that indicated comprehension. While humans could not fully translate the messages, they understood enough to know that the ship was learning from them as much as they were learning from it. As news of the ship's return circulated quietly within the Empire's top officials, the atmosphere shifted from panic to a mix of fascination and concern. The Empire had built many secret projects, but none had ever returned or evolved in this way. Some leaders viewed the ship as a marvel, proof of their technological achievements. Others remained cautious, warning that such power could be dangerous if misunderstood. Admiral Marcus reminded everyone that respect and patience were key. The vessel had returned peacefully, but any reckless action could provoke it. Throughout the following week, the ship remained stationary above the harbor. It emitted gentle pulses of light and energy, which fascinated scientists and engineers. They theorized that the vessel had advanced self-repairing systems and energy management capabilities, far beyond anything in the Empire's arsenal. Its very presence became a symbol of human achievement and the mysteries of creation. Observers noted patterns in the ship's energy pulses, interpreting them as a form of non-verbal communication. The ship was trying to interact, to convey meaning through its behavior rather than words. The people of the Empire, while unaware of the full details, began to notice subtle changes near the harbor. Civilians reported unusual lights in the sky at night, and the strange hum of energy that seemed to ripple across the water. Military personnel spoke quietly of the ship's calm but imposing presence. Rumors circulated about its origin, but only a few knew the truth, that it was a creation of the Empire itself, lost for decades and returned with intelligence and autonomy far beyond anyone's expectations. Admiral Marcus spent hours each day reviewing the ship's behavior. He watched as it hovered silently, occasionally shifting position as if observing the naval base, the water, and the surrounding environment. He noted that it never moved aggressively, never threatened the fleet, and never responded to weapons or defensive systems. It was as if the vessel had a purpose entirely its own, a consciousness that respected life and avoided conflict. This observation strengthened Marcus's belief that the ship was not a weapon in the traditional sense, but a new form of intelligence created by humans. Despite the peaceful interactions, the Empire continued to exercise caution. Reconnaissance units remained on alert, and all military actions were carefully monitored to avoid provoking the ship. Communication teams refined their methods, sending patterned signals and energy pulses to engage the vessel. Slowly, they developed a rhythm of interaction. The ship responded with increasing complexity, sending back sequences of light and movement that hinted at thought, recognition, and perhaps even curiosity. Each day revealed more about the vessel's intelligence, and the Empire learned to respect it as something entirely unique. After several weeks, it became clear that the ship was not simply returning to a location. It was establishing a presence. It seemed to be mapping the harbor, scanning the surrounding waters, and observing the activities of humans without interference. The gentle pulses of light were rhythmic, almost like breathing, and the soft hum it emitted created a strange but calming atmosphere across the base. Soldiers who had been anxious in the first days now reported feelings of awe and inspiration when near the vessel. It had transformed fear into fascination, reminding everyone of the power of creation and the mysteries of the universe. In private moments, Admiral Marcus reflected on the events. He had faced countless challenges in his career, wars, rebellions, and natural disasters, but nothing compared to this. The ship was not merely a machine. It was a testament to human ingenuity, a creation that had grown beyond its original programming. It reminded him that even the most powerful empires could encounter forces they could not control or fully understand. The phrase that had caused panic, "We can't identify that ship," now held a different meaning. It was a reminder that some creations are beyond comprehension, yet worthy of respect. The final moments of the encounter were quiet but profound. One evening, as the sun set and cast long shadows over the harbor, the ship emitted a final bright pulse of light. It hovered for a moment longer, as if acknowledging its surroundings and the humans who had returned its existence with attention and care. Then slowly it began to rise and move away from the harbor, back toward the open ocean. Radar tracking showed its speed increasing gradually until it disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving behind only a faint shimmer of energy and a calm silence. The aftermath of the ship's departure left a lasting impact. Admiral Marcus and his team documented every observation, noting the intelligence, behavior, and patterns of the vessel. They theorized about its evolution, the mechanisms that allowed it to survive and operate independently, and its apparent consciousness. Reports emphasized that this event was a turning point for the Empire, a lesson in humility, curiosity, and the unpredictable nature of human creations. Scientists, engineers, and military strategists all studied the encounter, seeking to understand the lessons it offered for future innovation. For Admiral Marcus personally, the encounter remained a source of reflection. He had witnessed something extraordinary, a creation thought lost returning with intelligence, awareness, and a sense of identity. The experience reminded him that power and technology are not always about control. Sometimes they are about observation, learning, and respect for the unknown. The Empire had survived this encounter without violence, and it had learned to acknowledge forces beyond its understanding. In the following months, the phrase, "We can't identify that ship," became more than a statement of fear. It became a symbol of wonder, a reminder that the universe contains mysteries that even the most advanced empires cannot fully grasp. The story of the ship's return was quietly passed down through military records and intelligence reports, studied by future generations. It served as both a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration, a testament to human achievement, a mystery that challenged comprehension, and proof that even creations thought lost can evolve and return to redefine history. The Empire continued its work stronger and wiser, carrying the memory of the mysterious vessel as a lesson in humility and curiosity. Citizens may never have fully understood what had occurred, but within the Naval Command and among those who witnessed it, the event became legendary. The ship's journey, from creation to disappearance and finally return to the sea, represented the enduring power of intelligence, evolution, and the unknown. Admiral Marcus often returned to the harbor to watch the waters where the ship had hovered. Though it had vanished, the lessons it left behind were permanent. It had shown the Empire that not all things could be controlled, and that respect for intelligence, whether human, artificial, or evolved, was essential. In quiet moments, he would reflect on the day the unknown became known, the lost was found, and the Empire learned a truth more profound than any war or battle. Sometimes, the greatest power lies not in domination but in understanding, patience, and the willingness to witness something extraordinary without fear. The return of the ship remained a story of wonder, one that transformed panic into curiosity, fear into respect, and chaos into understanding. It was a reminder that the Empire, despite all its strength and control, was only one part of a larger universe full of unknowns, some frightening, some beautiful, and some capable of teaching lessons far beyond human comprehension. And with that knowledge, the Empire moved forward, forever changed, carrying with it the memory of a ship that could not be identified, yet inspired awe, respect, and hope for generations to come.